Hang on just a second.
And start gathering around. We'll get started here in just a minute. So good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. It's turned out to be a beautiful day. The weather's cooperated wonderfully, and I appreciate everybody that made time in their schedule to come out for this historic day. Recently retired as the executive director out here, and I'm honored to be part of today's program. This is a project that we started about a year ago with Norfolk Southern, and a lot of folks here at the museum kind of said, hey, you started it, you need to show up and MC it. So I'm honored to be out here for this. It's a tremendous day for the museum and the history of the museum. It's really a pleasure to be doing the national election, given that this is a historic car that President Roosevelt used for many, many presidential journeys, whistle stop tours, such in the late 30s and into the early 40s. For this opportunity, we want to thank the good folks at Norfolk Southern for their generosity. And in particular, I need to recognize Connor Poe, who's out here today. He's our Regional Vice President for Norfolk Southern, and he's driven this project for about a year now. I also want to take a moment and recognize Sue Kelly, Randy Minner, and Andrew Durden from the museum staff who've organized the logistics for today's event. Todd DeFeo and Stacy Mansfield. Todd's with the museum staff. Stacy is the Director of Corporate Communications at Norfolk Southern. They've handled a lot of the PR and communication issues, and we're grateful for them. Long before the President had Air Force One, rail travel was the way to do whistle stop tours, campaign stops, business trips. It's a luxurious way to travel, and we'll move the car here in a little bit so that everybody can start getting socially distanced guided tours. President Roosevelt traveled in this car from, like I said earlier, in the early 1930s up until World War II, when the Ferdinand Magellan was outfitted with extra security to become his primary car. Would have traveled many, many trips on the track outside our gates here between Washington and Warm Springs. We're honored today to receive this donation and to be able to place it alongside the Superb, which is President Harding's private car. So eventually the two of them will be coupled together inside Building 1 here. Together, these artifacts are going to help us interpret rail history, presidential history, the rail transportation, and railroads in particular played in that history. As we go through the day, there's going to be several speakers. Sue Kelly, who is our interim executive director, is going to follow me, so Sue will start making her way up here. After Sue, we're going to hear from John Friedman with Norfolk Southern's Vice President of Network Planning and Optimization. And then Andrew Durden is going to share some personal connections and handle the key handoff for the transition. Sue?
Thanks, Randy. I'm Sue Kelly, Interim Executive Director of the Southeastern Railway Museum. I want to welcome you to the Southeastern Railway Museum. If you look behind you and over the fence there, you will see the tracks of our neighbor, Norfolk Southern. This historic day started with a neighborly conversation, literally over the back fence between Norfolk Southern and the Southeastern Railway Museum. I'd like to thank everyone who brought this neighborly conversation into where we stand today on Marco Polo. Thanks to our neighbors from Norfolk Southern, John Friedman, Connor Poe, Stacy Mansfield, and the women and men of Norfolk Southern who brought this historic car here today. I also want to thank our core group right here at the museum that brought this conversation into reality. Randy Perkle, Andrew Durden, Randy Minter, and Todd DeFeo, and to all our staff and volunteers here at the Southeastern Railway Museum who every day give their heart and soul to preserve history and bring it to life. Thank you, Norfolk Southern, and everyone here at the museum. I look forward to our neighborly bonds continuing for many years to come. And now I'd like to look for if Andrew Durden would make your way up here. And John Friedman, if you would come up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm pleased to be here representing Norfolk Southern and to hand over the keys to this 70-foot long land yacht. Really is probably the Gulfstream jet of its day, albeit at an altitude of about 20 feet off the ground. Today, as we donate the car to the Southeastern Railway Museum, it just feels right that the car should reside next to the main line that it traversed so many times in service of Norfolk Southern, its predecessors, and carrying so many luminaries. As Norfolk Southern increases its presence in the region, as a proud corporate citizen of the Atlanta area, of Gwinnett, and Duluth specifically, and as we're moving our headquarters to Atlanta, it's important that we bring our history with us, and by placing the car here, we make our history and our heritage more accessible to all. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody from the museum and from Norfolk Southern, especially Connor, Stacy, and others. And it's good to see so many from Norfolk Southern out in the crowd today. So, believe it or not, there actually is a set of keys to the car, though it appears unlocked. But I'd like to present them to the museum and have them formally take possession of the car. Congratulations.
Good morning. For those that haven't met me, I'm Andrew Durden. I've been a volunteer at the museum since around 1999 and currently the Chief Mechanical Officer. The museum has had many ups and downs since I've been around, but in general has accomplished a tremendous amount in that period of time. I'm very proud to be here for this event and extremely grateful to Norfolk Southern for giving us the opportunity to house this very important and historic rail car. I wanted to speak briefly with you today to relate a personal connection to Marco Polo. Like many of the folks that get into railroading, I have several relatives who work for the railroads. They had all passed on by the time I came along, but I grew up on stories of them. This particular relative that's connected to the Marco Polo was my great-great-uncle on my mother's side. His name was Angus Conine McLeod, and he was a Southern Railway engineer on the Atlanta Division. He was near the top of the seniority list for most of Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, so he regularly hauled the president and the Marco Polo on his trips to Warm Springs. Ang, as he was known to family members, AC to his fellow railroaders, was promoted to road foreman during Roosevelt's third term. He was called upon to run the lead locomotive out of Warm Springs when the Southern brought Roosevelt's funeral train back to Atlanta. At that point, the Marco Polo had been replaced by the Ferdinand Magellan, but it was still very much worth mentioning on this occasion. Very shortly after beginning Roosevelt's final journey, Angus refused to cross the picket line and was bumped back to engineer. He retired in 1967 after serving as engineer of the Royal Palm passenger train between Atlanta and Chattanooga, and on some of the early pig trains, those are piggyback trains. I told this story not to call attention to myself, but to stress the importance of these personal stories about the history of railroads. We can look at pictures of all of the magnificent locomotives and passenger cars, even tour them, but without passing down reminiscences of the people that actually operated it and occupied them. Once again, very sincere thanks to Norfolk Southern for the loan of the Marco Polo. And I look forward to being able to help show it off and working with Norfolk Southern in the future as you establish your headquarters here in Atlanta. Thank you.
So thank you again to Norfolk Southern. Thank you all for coming out and joining us on this momentous occasion. If you'll give us a little while, we are going to relocate the car a little bit and put a set of steps on the back end of it so that we can do tours at a social distance manner, and everybody will get an opportunity today, tomorrow, to have a guided tour through. See what a fascinating piece of history Norfolk Southern has donated to the museum. I appreciate it, and I thank you all for being here.
That was a very good speech.